I'm the animated heroine at a temporary location, and for this episode of Real vs. Real, we're going to look at Megamind and Despicable Me. But before we do, I'd like to go into a brief history of my experience with these films.
Both of these films came out in 2010. Despicable Me came out in the summer alongside Toy Story 3 and Shrek Forever After, and Megamind came out later alongside Disney's Tangled. Now, not only did I see Despicable Me in theaters, I actually got a hold of some advance tickets and got to see it a month before it officially came out. I went to see all of the animated movies that came out that summer, and must have seen the Megamind trailer every time I did, and you know, it didn't really look all that interesting to me.
Now, part of the problem is, up until recently, I've had a very low opinion of DreamWorks. Now, I was actually one of the people who really enjoyed the first Shrek when it came out, and that was during a time in my life, a time I imagine many people go through, where I really disliked the Disney company, for various reasons. Some of them quite justified, others not so much. But then DreamWorks started releasing other films. They were dead to me. For a while, the only DreamWorks films I only saw because a friend rented or something, and most of them were meh.
Now, in 2010, DreamWorks released 3 films. One was Shrek 4, one was Megamind, and one was How to Train Your Dragon. And it was finally seeing that movie that got me interested in DreamWorks again, because it's really, really good. After that, and after hearing a lot of praise for Megamind, I did finally see it too.
When I saw the previews for these films, I would have bet that Despicable Me was going to be better. But after seeing both, did my opinion change? Let's find out.
As per usual, we'll start with what the movies have in common. The main thing is that both of the main characters are villains. One has minions, the other has minion, and both films introduce something or someone that changes our main character's perspective on life.
What secrets? You're so predictable.
Actually, there's some debate on whether or not one of these films is ripping off the other, given that they do have similar themes and were released around the same time. And a lot of people think that it's DreamWorks ripping off Illumination, and well, it wouldn't be the first time, but I think it's more likely the other way around. Given that, 1, this is Illumination's first release, and 2, there are things in Despicable Me that seem not only like Megamind, but like DreamWorks in general.
One being the insistence of ending with dancing. I just don't get that trend in modern animation. I mean, what if every animated film company decided that their movies needed to end with a dramatic monologue or a cook-off? You'd think they'd all gone mad. This is silly, stop it. Anyways, enough of that. Let's talk about the characters. The main character in Despicable Me is Gru. I love this guy's design. The nose, the sunken eyes, the slightly hunched stature. He looks like a CG version of those classic villains in black and white cartoons. He's also got an awesome house and some cool gadgets. One thing you could argue is that Gru doesn't do anything exceptionally evil. Most of what he does just makes him look like an ass, like what any jerk would do if they had a massive tank or a freeze ray. Although, I still don't get why he keeps balloons in his jacket. Is it just in case he comes across a small child? And why does he know how to make balloon animals? Whatever. For an ass, he's pretty likable. I think one major problem of any form of media is that sometimes the main character is not the most interesting person in the story. And I don't think that's the case here. Part of his appeal, of course, is the fact that he's not a nice moral hero. Everyone loves a villain, and it's fun to see one in a lead role. He also has something of a backstory so you can get a feel for why he is the way he is, and he's sympathetic enough so that we're invested in his growth as a character and we can root for him. Next, there's Gru's 3 adoptive daughters, Margo, Edith, and Agnes, and I don't think they're quite as strong of characters as he is. They have no backstory whatsoever except for the fact that they're orphans. I think it would have helped define them a little better if there was some indication of who they are. Not that I'm looking for the film to give us their life story or anything, just something. For example, look at the kid in Up. He definitely has a distinct personality, but there's also stuff like that story about him and his dad sitting on the curb eating ice cream. Now, I don't mean to compare this film to Up, but it's little things like that that can really shape a character. It doesn't have to be lengthy or intrusive, just a little indication that makes us feel as if there's more to them than what we're seeing on screen. With Margo, Edith, and Agnes, I always sort of found myself asking a lot of questions, like, are they sisters? They act like it, but they have 3 different hair colors and 2 different eye colors between the 3 of them. And if not, then why is he adopting all 3? Still, I do like them. They're pretty enjoyable, and they have their own identifying character traits. Margo's the bossy older sister who's sort of skeptical of Gru in the situation. Edith is the tomboy who seems to be fascinated with dangerous and gross things, and Agnes is the cute, marketable one that makes you go, aww. I never got bored watching them, I just think they could have had a little more depth. Then there's Gru's henchman, Dr. Nefario, who is pretty awesome. He's sort of your basic mad scientist, but really, really old. He's usually pretty fun. Actually, I think I laughed hardest at some of his scenes.
He'll be alright, I'm sure.
Do the effects wear off?
So far, no, they don't.
Also in Gru's arsenal are the minions, who could have been really irritating, but are actually also pretty enjoyable. Mainly because they seem like a cross between a Warner Brothers cartoon and those aliens from Toy Story. They're bouncy and curious and childish, but they're also really violent and destructive, and that can be a pretty funny combination.
I haven't told you what it is yet.
Then there's the villain, who could have been irritating and is.
The villain is Vector, and I guess the thought behind this is that since we have an interesting villain as the hero, then the actual villain doesn't have to be menacing or interesting at all. He is occasionally funny, but he's basically just a really dorky, irritating character. A good villain should at least give you some sense of menace, and Vector never makes you feel that way. Actually, I always got the feeling that if Gru ever got within arm's length of him, the kid would get his ass kicked. The only thing he has going for him is his technology, so he's kind of just like a tech nerd, only less scary. Look at that. How can you be a threat with a fanny pack? The main character of Megamind is Megamind. While Gru does have a little bit of a backstory that sort of tells you why he became a villain, Megamind actually shows you exactly why he did. He was raised in a prison, and actually as a kid he did try to be nice and make friends. It just didn't work out for him. And because every attempt to be good seemed to backfire, he just figured it was his destiny to be bad. Right from the start, we sympathize and root for this character, which is good, because as a villain, he does way more than Gru. Megamind's actions sort of parody the classic comic book villains, only played up for laughs. He's actually trying to destroy the good guy and take over the city, and kinda does.
You're kidding, right?
He's also pretty funny and enjoyable to watch. I'm not a huge Will Ferrell fan, but he's perfect for this role. Megamind's just the perfect combination of style and pathetic.
The love interest in Megamind is Roxanne, and honestly, I don't really care for her. I don't think she's bad, I just don't find her particularly interesting either. See, there are two common archetypes for your standard animated heroine.
The first one is seen in the days of classic Disney, where the heroine's whole function is just to be pretty and delicate and perfect. Just someone who's nice to everyone and someone for the prince to rescue. The second archetype came later, when Disney realized that, oh crap, can't do this anymore, the feminists will get us. These women were written to be tough and independent. They can take care of themselves and jump over big gaps and fight off guards and then still have to be rescued constantly by the main character. Okay.
Roxanne is the second type, and honestly, archetypes don't have to be a bad thing if the characters are interesting despite of them, but I don't really think she is. Again, she's not bad, I just don't really care about her.
She's basically a parody of Lois Lane, in that she always gets kidnapped and then has to be rescued. I guess you could argue that at least she's trying to do things and be more than a damsel, and I guess she is supposed to be smart. But I don't know, there just doesn't seem to be all that much to her. Maybe it's the lack of flaws again. Some people compare their romance to the romance between Shrek and Fiona, and while I don't think Shrek is a better movie than Megamind, I actually kind of like Fiona more as a character, just because she did need to learn to look past Shrek's physical appearance, and perhaps equally important, had to learn how to accept herself too. Roxanne doesn't have a problem with appearances, in fact she says so in the dinner scene with her and Megamind. She judges people based on their actions, which is good, but it just kind of makes her more of a role model instead of a character. Not a bad thing, but, well, maybe it wouldn't be so obvious if it weren't for the fact that the other characters in this movie are actually pretty well written. Minion is awesome. There's sort of a subplot resembling a buddy comedy between him and Megamind that's enjoyable, and they are hilarious together. Plus, he's also a good friend and is willing to mostly go along with Megamind's plans even if they don't always make sense to him.
I'm not going to bother going over Brad Pitt's character since he's not in the film for very long, so I guess that just leaves us with the villain. And honestly, the villain in this movie is freaking awesome. Now, I admit I think he might be ripping off Syndrome from The Incredibles a little bit, but honestly, I don't even care.
What's really interesting about him is that he doesn't start off as a villain. He's just a dork, and he seems like kind of a nice guy in a weird stalker type way. Honestly, going into this film, I had no clue he was going to be the villain. I thought he was just a quirky side character or comic relief. Megamind accidentally gives him superpowers and tries to train him to be Metro City's new hero. But Roxanne was the only reason he was interested in being a hero in the first place, and after Roxanne rejects him, he decides to become a villain instead. And man, for being something of a joke to begin with, this character gets really intimidating. He comes off as a real threat later in this movie. There are scenes with him that I actually found kind of chilling, and that is awesome.
Whoa, 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 whoa. This isn't how you play the game. Game over.
So I prefer the villain in Megamind and the girls in Despicable Me, and I like all of the other characters in both movies, so I guess that leaves us with the plot.
Despicable Me focuses mainly on Gru's plans to steal the moon. In order to do so, he needs a shrink ray, and in order to get that, he needs to be able to sneak into Vector's house. He adopts Margo, Edith, and Agnes to use them in order to get past Vector's defenses because Vector buys some cookies from them. And from there, it's pretty easy to guess what's going to happen. There are absolutely no twists in this movie. It is entirely predictable, but despite this, I do still enjoy it. One thing I like is the father-daughter theme, which I think is more refreshing than a love story. Some of the funniest stuff in the film is in the first half when we see the villain Gru go up against a bunch of little girls. And then in the second half, it's enjoyable to watch that relationship grow.
Like a dead guy.
There's just something appealing about a big scary guy in gingham and playing Tea Party.
I still found Roxanne and Megamind's relationship enjoyable, but I just didn't care about it as much. So, with that in mind, does that mean I think Despicable Me is better? Nope.
In Despicable Me, the only thing Gru cares about at the start of the movie is being the best villain. His whole career has been leading up to this one heist, but by inadvertently acquiring 3 daughters, his priorities change and he gives up the moon for them. All of that is just fine. It's a nice story. It's nothing new. It's a story we've seen a million times. It's just that this time it happens to be with a villain, which basically makes it a stale concept with a refreshing approach.
I do still like this movie. I don't think there's anything wrong with just being a nice, silly, feel-good film. But while comparing two films like these together, while the similarities are important, it's really the differences that set them apart. If Megamind had just been a film about Megamind and Roxanne's relationship, then I probably would have said Despicable Me is better. But one thing that Megamind does better than Despicable Me is it takes advantage of its theme and it takes itself more seriously. Remember in my last Real vs. Real when I said that characters going through a major change should show some sort of mental transformation? Well, while both films do this to a degree, it's Megamind that really looks at the idea of a bad guy suddenly forced into a good guy's role.
The only thing Megamind really cares about at the beginning of the film is beating Metro Man, which he does within the first 10 minutes of the movie. Afterwards, he takes over the city, has fun for a while, and then begins to go into a personal crisis because he feels that his entire purpose in life is gone. His solution is to create a new hero using Metro Man's DNA, because he feels that a villain without a hero is nothing. And then, when the hero goes bad, he finds he has to take on the role of hero himself. Not only is that a really interesting premise, but it's full of really fascinating ideas.
Well, there's nothing wrong with Despicable Me's storyline. It's perfectly fine. Megamind just has a lot more to it. Where Despicable Me is predictable, Megamind is full of twists and turns. It also has a pretty mature and interesting look at the nature of good and evil. And because of this, Megamind is honestly on a whole different level than Despicable Me. DreamWorks has always tried to be a company that appeals to an older audience. Early films like Ants lacked balance, so that the kid stuff felt out of place and the adult stuff felt harsh. But in my opinion, films like Megamind and How to Train Your Dragon really nail it. I don't think Megamind is as good as How to Train Your Dragon, but I don't consider it a downgrade either. If anything, these films are proof that DreamWorks is capable of really thoughtful animated movies with depth and complexity, and it really makes me look forward to whatever they have in store for the future.